Welcome to the USA Dog Behavior Podcast, where we explore one simple question. Why is your dog behaving this way? Whether it's aggression, fear, anxiety, resource guarding, excessive barking, or other challenging behaviors, every behavior has a reason, a root cause. I'm Scott Sheaffer, a certified canine behavior consultant and aggression specialist based in Dallas, Texas. Through comprehensive online behavior assessments, I work with dog owners all across the United States to better understand their dog's behavior. Well, let's get started with today's episode. Today we're talking about separation anxiety in dogs, of course. More specifically, how to recognize it, how to separate it from ordinary boredom or nuisance behaviors, and what actually helps to address separation anxiety if your dog has it. If your dog barks for hours, destroys something near the door, eliminates in the house, or becomes frantic as you prepare to leave, you may have been told your dog is being stubborn, spiteful, or manipulative. Or you may just feel that way. No one even said anything to you, because it does kind of feel that way. I want to start by challenging that idea, however. Your dog is not making a statement, I promise. Your dog is in distress. This is more than your dog just being sad that you're leaving. All dogs don't want their owners to leave. No dog is happy about that. Most dogs would rather come with you wherever you're going. Separation anxiety, however, is a much more serious emotional reaction to being left alone or to being separated from a particular person. For some dogs, it looks like panic, and if it is severe enough, it is panic, with all the resultant things that go with that. Adrenaline, tunnel vision, can't hear, heart rate, breathing, all those panic responses, just like we have as humans. And that really matters because the plan cannot be, well, my dog will just get used to it if I leave them long enough and frequently enough. Most dogs do not become calmer by repeatedly experiencing panic. What they do instead is they practice the panic, and they get better at it. The first thing I recommend is also one of the easiest things an owner can do if their dog has separation anxiety. Record your dog after you leave. Use a pet camera. There's a number of these on the market. Just Google it. A phone camera or any device that lets you see the first, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes of alone time that your dog has when you leave. Don't just rely on what the house looks like when you return or what you're hearing when you're walking out the door. In other words, if the dog's barking or whining. The video tells you when the behavior starts, how long it lasts, and what it looks like. You can also share this recording with a certified canine behavior consultant if you elect to get outside help. I know when clients do that with me, it's extremely helpful for me to see myself what the dog is doing. But more on this in a second. You may see on this recording, you may see pacing, panting, whining, drooling, trembling is common, barking, howling, scratching at doors and windows, chewing at exits, or attempts to escape. One of the hallmarks of separation anxiety, you don't really see this that much in the literature, if you're reading about it, the clinical literature. The sounds that dogs make can really be eerie. They can make some very unusual distress sounds that you don't ever normally hear from your dog. And the variety of those sounds is pretty substantial. So obviously record and make sure that sound is turned up as well, because that can be a real good diagnostic tool if you get outside assistance. We find that some dogs urinate or defecate only when they're left alone. They never have any house training issues at all, but when they're left alone, they do a lot of this. And the unique thing about that kind of urination and defecation that's associated with separation anxiety is it's normally a lot of them varied throughout the house. It's not just one defecation or one or two substantial urinations. It's going to be a lot of those, a lot of urination, a lot of defecation, smaller amounts. That would be one of the hallmarks. Most dogs with separation anxiety refuse foods they normally love when they are alone. This is one of the hallmark diagnostic tools. Dogs that normally have hearty appetites, boy, the moment you leave them alone and they're experiencing separation anxiety, they just stop eating. That last one that I just mentioned, not eating, is worth paying attention to. If your dog has pretty severe separation anxiety, not taking food, when you leave, and if we try to do some kind of food treatment, if they're not taking the food, then that's something we can take off the table. It really can complicate the treatment. What I'm trying to say is the more severe the separation anxiety, the more difficult it is to treat. When dogs won't eat, when the owner leaves, it usually indicates a moderate or greater level of separation anxiety. As I mentioned earlier, it's a good diagnostic tool. But this is important, what I'm about ready to say. Destruction by itself does not prove separation anxiety. A dog can be bored. A dog can react to people or dogs outside while you're gone. A dog can have a problem with confinement. A dog can even have a medical reason for house soiling and doing things that look like separation anxiety. We have to be careful, so sometimes they show some of the attributes of separation anxiety, but that's not really what it is. And I know when I interview new clients, that's what I do, is I ask them a lot of questions to make sure it's not something else. And I would say, and I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here a little bit, I would say 10 to 20% of the time it's not separation anxiety, it's something else. That's why we look for patterns in separation anxiety. What happens only when you are gone? How soon does it begin? What does a dog do when no one is there to influence them? Those are the kinds of questions I like to ask to tease out what's really going on. Once I have that information, or once you get that information, you can avoid one of the most common mistakes, which is punishing the dog after the fact. If you come home to a chewed door or an accident on the floor, scolding is probably understandable. You're upset and you want to scold your dog, but it doesn't teach the dog what you intended. The dog cannot connect a punishment delivered now with something that happened while you were gone. More importantly, if anxiety was driving the behavior, punishment can make the whole departure and return cycle even more stressful. Your dog can become afraid of you. This is never good. So, Scott's rule, never punish your dog for accidents, defecating, urinating in the house, for tearing up something, whatever. Don't ever do that when you come home. The dog will not connect it to what they did. And two, all you're doing is increasing their anxiety and making them afraid of you. None of those things are going to help. I know it's tough, but there's better ways to address this. And we're going to talk about a couple of those here in a minute. Another mistake that's made is treating the crate as an automatic solution. In other words, just throwing the dog in a crate. Some dogs rest comfortably in a crate when the owners are gone. I would say that's most dogs. For others, especially a dog already panicking about being alone, confinement can make the distress worse. Dog can be okay in the house or not as distressed, but we put them in a smaller area called secondary confinement, and it can make it much worse. Even with a dog who is normally okay in the crate. A dog who is trying to break out of a crate when they're alone, when they're suffering from separation anxiety, can damage their teeth, nose, nails, or paws, and I see this all the time. They're so desperate to get out of the crate, they injure themselves. Let the camera and the dog in front of you guide the setup for your dog. Your dog may do better in a dog-proofed room, behind a gate, or in a larger area. There is no one setup that is right for every dog. Another thing that can really help is covering the crate. These open wire crates frequently don't make a dog feel really comfortable. Dogs are den animals, so I tell people all the time, if you have one of these open wire crates, cover it. Cover the top, sides, and backs, and leave the front open. That can help a lot of times too. Before we get into training or behavior modification topics, let's talk about management of separation anxiety. If your dog is having true panic whenever you leave, try to reduce those full panic absences while treatment gets underway. That might mean a family member, a trusted sitter, a different work schedule, or taking the dog along when practical. In other words, minimize the amount of isolation. That is not coddling a dog. It is preventing repeated rehearsals of the very response you're trying to change. Remember, and I'm fond of saying this, practice not only makes perfect, but makes permanent. When your dog practices a panic behavior, and your dog can't help it, your dog doesn't want to do this, it feels really bad to him, but when they keep rehearsing it or practicing it, it does tend to make it more permanent and frequently not only permanent, but worse. You can also create a calm, safe environment. Some dogs benefit from white noise or quiet music, quiet classical music, to reduce the impact of outside sounds. We know that the majority of dogs with separation anxiety are noise phobic, meaning they're already sensitive to noises. It makes them nervous. And so when you layer that on top of the separation anxiety, it gets really bad. So make sure you do that. It's something I always like to get my clients to do. Some dogs can enjoy a food toy, a puzzle, or a meal when you leave. This is certainly not all of them, and if it's typically moderate or greater, they probably won't play with these things. But if they do, that's a real plus. The key is to read your dog. Food is not magic. Many of them won't take it. If the dog won't touch it because they're too worried, that tells you absence is already more difficult than the dog can handle. So think about it. A dog who really loves meals and treats and things like that, the fact that they stop doing that tells you how stressed they are. Just like humans. Some humans eat more when they're stressed, but a lot of humans stop eating. Dogs almost always stop eating when they get super stressed. The real behavior work is gradual desensitization and counter-conditioning. I know those are kind of geeky words, but the concept is really straightforward. We want to make very small pieces of separation feel safe to your dog and predictable, while changing the dog's emotional response to the things that predict you leaving. Start under threshold. And what that means is at a sub-panic level. Start doing this with your dog at a level where they are not showing separation anxiety or very, very limited. Under threshold means your dog is still calm enough to think, relax, and learn. You might begin with your dog resting on a mat while you take a few steps away. I mean, literally in your house. The dog is sitting on a mat in a stay, let's say, and you move away, and then you come back. Then you may increase the challenge by stepping behind a doorway for a brief moment. You may pick up your keys, then put them down. So that would be called our departure ritual. And dogs with separation anxiety know what that looks like. And if you have a dog with separation anxiety, I know you know what I'm talking about. When you get your purse, keys, wallet, whatever, your dog starts to get very stressed because that's a predictor of you leaving. So let's put them through that exercise at a sub-threshold level or a sub-panic level, just little teeny exercise. Just pick up your keys and put them down. Pick up your wallet, walk a few steps, put it down, then return, and then extend that. You may open and close the front door without leaving. That's a really good one. Or I should say, you may open and close whatever door you normally leave out of without leaving. So just open the door and close it. Open the door and close it. Open the door, walk outside for a second, then walk right back in. These can sound almost too small to matter, but that is exactly the point. We are not testing the dog. We are building success. We're starting at the shallow end of the pool, and we're moving toward the deep end, as your dog can tolerate it. As you build these exercises, change one thing at a time. If you increase distance, keep the time short. If you increase time, keep the distance easy. If you see worry on your dog, make the next repetition easier. Pushing a dog past their limit is not a faster route to improvement. It is information that you need to slow down. Before we continue, I want to take a second to tell you how I help dog owners dealing with serious behavior problems such as this, separation anxiety. I work with clients throughout the United States through comprehensive online behavior assessments where we identify why the behavior is happening, discuss safety and prognosis, and develop practical recommendations tailored to their individual dog's issue. If you'd like more information about working with me directly, visit usadogbehavior.com. Now let's get back to today's topic. For a serious case of separation anxiety, you should involve a certified canine behavior consultant and your veterinarian. And I want to tell you that when you seek a behavior professional, such as a certified canine behavior consultant, not only make sure that they're certified, but make sure that they also are experienced with separation anxiety, if they are familiar with it. Because it is a unique little bird. It really is. I treat about 15 major diagnoses in dogs, and separation anxiety is one of them. And I have to tell you, it's different from the other 14. It's just a very, very different thing. You also want to work with your veterinarian. I always like to say that when you treat separation anxiety, it's a three-legged stool. You, the dog owner, the behavior consultant, and your veterinarian. But first, a medical examination by your vet can help rule out problems that may contribute to your dog's separation anxiety, health-related issues. Although I have to tell you, I found physical causes of separation to be quite rare. Do they happen? Yes, but they're pretty rare. Second, behavior medication may be appropriate from some dogs whose anxiety is severe enough that they cannot stay under threshold or learn from the training process. And by medication, I'm talking about anti-anxiety medication, prescription that you get from your vet. There is nothing that I've ever seen, and I think I've tried them all through the years, over the counter that does anything. There's nothing. If your dog has a moderate or greater level of separation anxiety, there is nothing over the counter, now listen to me, that's going to really probably give any help. And furthermore, those things are much more expensive than the prescription medications. But let me say something about medication. And I have a video on this on my website. I talk about canine medication for behavior. Medication is not a replacement for behavior modification. But for the right dog, it can help make learning possible. We reduce the anxiety enough that the dog is receptive to these exercises. I generally recommend medication for cases, as I said earlier, that are at least moderate or greater in severity. I would also be careful about any plan that promises a fast cure, and I unfortunately see a lot of these. YouTube, in 30 minutes, the dog god is going to show you how to fix separation anxiety. And it's always something like he or she has some secret formula that no one else knows about. And I have to tell you, I've looked at a number of these things, and quite frankly, they're embarrassing. They're embarrassing because they're so silly, and they're just based on mythology and folklore and just self-training, I don't know. But they're also harmful because they're not going to help the dog. In fact, I think a lot of them make the dog worse. Separation anxiety is a serious behavior problem. It usually improves through careful, repeated work, not through forcing a dog to endure distress. Avoid punishment, harsh corrections, or any corrections for that matter, and advice that tells you to simply leave the dog until they stop reacting. The goal is not to make a frightened dog quieter. The goal is to help the dog feel safer. Remember what I always say, if you've listened to this podcast very much, what do I always say? Barking and all these kinds of aggression things and reactivity and all this kind of outward displays, those are only symptoms. They're not the root cause. So we want to do more than treat just the dog's whining, barking, and all that business while you're gone, and drooling, all those symptoms. we want to treat the root cause. And if we treat the root cause, what happens to those symptoms? They dissipate. If your dog struggles when you leave, your first job is to realize they are not being bad. They are being scared. Your first job is to observe, record what happens, look for patterns, then manage a situation so the dog is not repeatedly thrown into panic while you work in small, achievable steps. You want to be with the dog as much as possible so they don't rehearse the separation anxiety. And then you want to do little practice separations, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly. That approach, of course, takes patience. It's really boring. Can I tell you something? In the real world of dog behavior and animal behavior, it's really pretty boring. It's not like made for TV training, where we have dramatic, charismatic people on air and they miraculously fix dogs in 20 minutes with the other 10 minutes for advertisements with voiceovers and music and special graphics. And then near the end of the show, they show a happy family with a happy dog. Okay? That's just not the real world of animal science. Animal behavioral science is kind of boring, and that's how this is with your dog. In fact, have you thought about this? If you're doing the right kind of separation anxiety protocols and training, your dog should be bored. That's the whole idea. If they're bored with your leaving, they're no longer scared. So one of my other mantras is, things that scare you don't bore you, and things that bore you don't scare you. So keep that in mind. A dog that can manage 10 calm seconds today may not be ready by themselves, may not be ready for 10 minutes tomorrow, but it's a starting point, and you build slowly. But each calm repetition is useful. Oh, I just love that. Each calm repetition is useful. It's a good rep, not a bad rep. It's a good rep. Over time, those repetitions can add up to meaningful change, and you cannot do too many reps with this. That's another thing. If you're keeping your dog sub-panic or sub-threshold, you can't do too many reps. It's impossible. And I recommend you do several of these little mini separation reps, building to longer things every day while increasing the amount of alone time for the dog incrementally, very slowly as a dog can tolerate it. Do this so slowly, of a period of weeks and months, probably more like months if I'm being honest with you. Be careful to watch your dog's body language and ensure that you're doing these exercises at a level where the dog is absolutely showing no signs of panic. I'm going to include in the show notes, in the episode notes, a link to a body language video that I'd like you to see as well, because being able to read what your dog is telling you as you practice miniature, small, and increasing separation from your dog is super important. We need to see what they're doing so we know how fast to proceed. And here's a pro tip for you. The tipping point for this is 2 hours. If your dog can calmly tolerate being alone for 2 hours, then they should be able to move at a little faster rate toward 3 hours, 4 hours, etc. The first 2 hours are usually the most difficult. Separation anxiety can be frustrating and emotionally draining for owners. A lot of people tell me they feel like they're captives in their own home. They're hostages. They feel like they can't leave. And that's a terrible feeling. But this is not a hopeless situation. Understand the reason behind the behavior, anxiety. Get clear information from videos that you take of the dog to see what they're doing when you leave. Avoid punishment and build a plan that respects your dog's threshold. When you stop treating the problem as defiance and start treating it as distress, which is what it is, you're much closer to a solution that actually helps your dog. You can find additional articles, videos, and podcast episodes by visiting my website at usadogbehavior.com. Almost all of this content is free, by the way. If you found today's episode helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with someone who has a dog that could benefit from it. specifically today's episode, that has separation anxiety. That helps more dog owners find the show and supports the work I do. Until next time, remember, your dog's behavior always has a reason, a cause. Find the reason, and you're much closer to finding the solution. I'm Scott Sheaffer. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode.